I'm Caitlin Davis, 32, and 3 months ago I inherited $12 million from Maxwell, my boss and mentor of 7 years. After careful planning, I decided to share my fortune with my family at our monthly dinner. I always had this uneasy feeling about discussing money with them, especially with my sister Heather. That night confirmed my worst fears when she screamed, "You manipulated that old man for his money." I never expected my own blood to betray me so publicly. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on my greedy family. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minneapolis. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. My parents, Robert and Diane Davis, worked stable jobs that kept us comfortable but always stressed about bigger expenses. My father worked as a manager at a local hardware store, while my mother was an elementary school administrator. They instilled in us the value of hard work, but there was always this underlying current of resentment toward those who had more. My sister Heather is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she always had to have what I had, only better. If I got a B+ on a test, she'd wave her A in my face. If I made the softball team, she'd make sure everyone knew she was team captain in volleyball. Our brother James, for years younger, was more laid back but easily swayed by Heather's strong personality. He'd often take her side in arguments, creating this 2-against-1 dynamic that followed us into adulthood. The rest of our extended family wasn't much better. Aunt Barbara and Uncle Gerald were always comparing their children to us, and family gatherings typically devolved into subtle competitions about whose kids were achieving more or who had renovated their kitchen most recently. I put myself through college at the University of Minnesota. Unlike Heather, who had our parents pay for her education, I was determined to make it on my own. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load. I waited tables at a local diner in the mornings, worked at the campus library in the afternoons, and did bookkeeping for a small business on weekends. That's how I met Maxwell Grant. He came into the diner every Tuesday morning for breakfast. A creature of habit, he always ordered the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter, and black coffee. He was in his early 60s then, with a full head of silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He owned a mid-sized tech company that specialized in security software. One morning, he noticed me studying between customers. I was working on an accounting problem that was giving me trouble. Maxwell, it turned out, had a background in finance before he transitioned to tech. He helped me work through the problem, and we struck up a friendship. 3 months later, when I mentioned I was looking for a more relevant job to my business degree, he offered me an entry-level position at his company. The pay was better than all 3 of my part-time jobs combined, and the hours would allow me to finish my degree. I accepted immediately. What started as a simple job became a mentorship. Maxwell took me under his wing, teaching me everything he knew about business. He saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. When I graduated, he promoted me to an assistant manager position. Over the next 7 years, I worked my way up to becoming his right hand in the company. I sacrificed a lot for that job. While my friends were traveling or getting married, I was working late nights and weekends. I missed family events to handle company emergencies. Heather never let me hear the end of it, constantly suggesting that I was married to my job and that Maxwell was working me to death. What she never understood was that I loved what I did. Maxwell had created a company culture that felt like family to me more than my actual family sometimes did. Last year, Maxwell was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, and within months, he was in hospice care. I visited him every day, bringing him updates about the company and sometimes just sitting with him so he wouldn't be alone. His own family lived across the country, and though they visited, they couldn't be there all the time. When he passed away, I was devastated. I'd lost not just a boss, but a mentor and friend. The funeral was small, mostly company employees and a few family members. I gave a eulogy that left everyone in tears, including myself. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from a woman named Sarah Bennett who identified herself as Maxwell's attorney. She asked to meet with me privately. I assumed it was about my position at the company, perhaps a severance package, since Maxwell's son would likely take over. When I arrived at her office, she informed me that Maxwell had left me a significant portion of his estate, $12 million in cash and investments, plus a 15% stake in the company. I was shocked speechless. Sarah explained that Maxwell had updated his will 6 months before his diagnosis, so this wasn't a deathbed decision made under duress. He had included a letter for me, which I read through tears in her office. "Caitlin," it read, "you have been the daughter I never had. Your dedication to our company has helped build something truly special, but more importantly, your kindness and integrity have made these last years of my life fulfilling in ways I never expected. I know you will use this gift wisely, not just for yourself, but for others. Make me proud." I kept the inheritance secret for 3 months. I needed time to process everything and decide what to do next. I consulted with financial advisors and set up meetings with philanthropic organizations. I planned to establish a scholarship fund in Maxwell's name and invest in emerging female entrepreneurs who reminded me of myself at a younger age. The only person I told was my boyfriend Ethan Parker, who I'd been dating for 2 years. Unlike my family, Ethan came from a wealthy background but lived modestly. He understood the complexities of sudden wealth and advised me to take my time before making any announcements. As the reality of my new financial situation settled in, I knew I couldn't keep it from my family forever. Minneapolis isn't a small town, but word gets around, especially in business circles. I decided to share the news at our monthly family dinner, hoping that the public setting might temper any extreme reactions. I spent weeks preparing for how to tell them. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipating questions and planning thoughtful answers. I even spoke with a therapist about how to handle potential jealousy or resentment. Despite all my preparation, nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. The monthly Davis family dinner was a tradition started by my mother when we all moved out of the house. "Just because you don't live under my roof anymore doesn't mean you get to be strangers," she'd say. Usually, it was just immediate family, but occasionally Aunt Barbara, Uncle Gerald, and family friends would join. That evening in April was unseasonably warm. I arrived at my parents' suburban home in my new car, a modest Audi that was my one splurge since receiving the inheritance. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes, collecting my thoughts and steadying my breathing. Something in my gut told me to be cautious, so I opened my phone and set it to record before slipping it into my jacket pocket. I didn't think I'd need it, but Maxwell always said, "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst." My mother answered the door with her usual hug and immediately commented on my appearance. "You look different, Caitlin. New haircut? Or is it that fancy moisturizer you were talking about last time?" It wasn't either of those things. What she was noticing was my reduced stress levels since I no longer had to worry about retirement or emergencies. "Just been sleeping better, Mom," I replied, stepping into the house. The living room was already full. My father Robert was in his usual recliner watching a baseball game. Heather and her husband Frank were on the couch, with James sitting on the floor playing with Heather's phone. Aunt Barbara and Uncle Gerald were at the dining table with a family friend, Patricia, who had known us since childhood. "Well, look who finally made it," Heather said. "We were just talking about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, for sure," she replied with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Patricia was just asking how your company is doing after your boss passed away." "Maxwell," I corrected her gently. "His name was Maxwell and the company is stable. His son is taking over but keeping the current management structure." "Including you?" my father asked, muting the TV. "Yes, including me. I'm still in the same position," I said. It wasn't a lie. I was still working in the same role, though now I also owned 15% of the company. My mother called us to dinner before the conversation could continue. I helped carry dishes to the dining room table, a large oak piece that had been in our family for generations. The smell of pot roast filled the air, my mother's specialty and a staple of our family dinners. As we settled in, my brother James commented on my car. "Nice ride, sis. Did you get a promotion or something?" I took a deep breath. This was as good an opening as any. "Actually, I've been waiting to share some news with everyone," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've had a pretty significant change in my financial situation recently." All eyes turned to me. My mother paused mid-serving. "What do you mean, dear?" she asked. 3 months ago, after Maxwell passed away, I learned that he left me a substantial inheritance, I explained. It was completely unexpected. He included a beautiful letter explaining that he thought of me like a daughter. "How substantial are we talking?" Uncle Gerald asked, always direct when it came to money. I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was best. $12 million plus a 15% stake in the company. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, but felt like an eternity. "You're joking," Heather finally said, her fork clattering against her plate. "I'm not," I replied. "I've spent the last 3 months meeting with financial advisors and planning how to use it responsibly. I'm setting up a scholarship fund in Maxwell's name and investing in female entrepreneurs." My father was the first to offer congratulations, though I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. My mother followed suit, though her smile seemed frozen. James looked genuinely happy for me, while Aunt Barbara and Uncle Gerald exchanged glances I couldn't quite interpret. It was Heather who shattered the moment. She laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the awkward silence. "Oh, come on," she said, setting down her utensils. "You expect us to believe that your boss just happened to leave you $12 million out of the goodness of his heart? A man 40 years your senior with actual family of his own." "Heather," my mother warned, but she was already gaining momentum. "No, Mom, I'm serious. This doesn't make any sense." She turned to me, eyes narrowed. "What did you really do to get that money, Caitlin? Because we all know people don't just give away millions to their employees." My cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. "What exactly are you implying, Heather?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it outright. You must have manipulated that old man somehow. Was he losing his mental faculties at the end? Did you take advantage of that?" Her voice was getting louder with each question. "Or was it something more? Were you sleeping with him?" "Heather," my father shouted, finally intervening. "That's enough." But it wasn't enough for her. She stood up, pointing at me accusingly. She shows up in a new car, announces she magically got $12 million from her elderly boss, and we're just supposed to accept that? Come on. She stole that money from a dying man and his family. The table erupted in chaos. My mother was telling Heather to sit down. My father was trying to restore order. James looked utterly confused. Aunt Barbara was whispering furiously to Uncle Gerald, while Patricia stared at her plate, clearly wishing she wasn't there. Through it all, I sat frozen, the weight of my sister's accusations crushing me. The worst part wasn't that she thought I was capable of such things. It was that others at the table seemed to be considering whether she might be right. I could see it in their sidelong glances and uncomfortable shifts in their seats. "I would never," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Maxwell was of sound mind when he updated his will. It happened 6 months before his diagnosis. His attorney has all the documentation. But Heather wasn't listening. She was on her phone, frantically searching for something. "Here," she said triumphantly, holding up her screen. "Maxwell Grant's obituary. It says he's survived by a son, a daughter, and 3 grandchildren. Did they know their grandfather gave away their inheritance to his young female employee?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and venomous. In that moment, I realized that my sister didn't just disbelieve me. She wanted to destroy this blessing I'd received. The jealousy I'd sensed all our lives had finally found its perfect target. The accusation of theft and manipulation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I was still trying to formulate a response when my father cleared his throat. "Caitlin," he said in that measured tone he used when he thought he was being the voice of reason, "you have to admit this is all very sudden and unusual." "There's nothing unusual about it," I insisted. Maxwell was a mentor to me for 7 years. We worked closely together. His children live across the country and hardly visited, even when he was dying. "So you admit you took advantage of family estrangement," Heather interjected. "That is not what I said," I snapped back. "I'm explaining the context of our relationship." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in a gesture that appeared supportive, but felt condescending. "Sweetheart, regardless of how you came into this money, don't you think the right thing to do would be to share it with your family? We've always supported each other." I stared at her in disbelief. Just minutes ago, my sister had essentially accused me of elder abuse, fraud, or prostitution, and now my mother was suggesting I share the inheritance? Uncle Gerald leaned forward, suddenly interested in the conversation in a way he hadn't been during Heather's accusations. $12 million is a substantial sum. Properly invested, it could benefit the entire family. "I already have plans for the money," I said firmly. "I've spent months working with financial advisors and charities to honor Maxwell's wishes." "But what about your family's wishes?" Aunt Barbara asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "Family should come before strangers, shouldn't it?" To my horror, everyone at the table except Patricia began nodding in agreement. The conversation had shifted from questioning the legitimacy of my inheritance to discussing how it should be distributed among them. "I think it's only fair that we each get an equal portion," Heather said, as if this were already decided. "There are 7 of us here, not counting Patricia, so that's almost $2 million each." "That's not how this works," I said, my voice rising with incredulity. "This money was left to me specifically. It's not a family inheritance." "Don't be selfish, Caitlin," my father said, his disappointment evident. "We're not asking for all of it. Just a fair share." "A fair share of something that isn't yours to begin with?" I asked. James, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "I could really use about $2 million to start that sports equipment business I've been talking about. It's a solid investment opportunity for you, sis." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My brother, who moments ago seemed happy for me, was now asking for $2 million as if he was doing me a favor by investing my money. "I need at least $3 million, Heather announced. "We want to buy a house in Edina, and Frank's business has some debts that need clearing. Plus college funds for our future kids." Frank nodded along, not making eye contact with me. They didn't even have children yet, but my money was already earmarked for their education. "Your father and I are thinking about retirement," my mother added. "$4 million would allow us to buy that condo in Florida we've had our eye on and travel like we've always wanted." I did the math quickly in my head. They had already allocated $9 million of my inheritance without so much as a congratulations. "What about the remaining $3 million?" I asked sarcastically. "Should I just sign that over to Aunt Barbara and Uncle Gerald?" "Well, we have been thinking about renovating our lake house," Uncle Gerald said, completely missing my sarcasm. "And Barbara's always wanted to travel to Europe first class." I felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone. In the span of 30 minutes, my family had gone from shocked to accusatory to entitled. "Remember when we paid for your car repair last year?" my mother said. "That was $800 we didn't have to spare. But we did it because you're our daughter." "I paid you back the next month," I reminded her. "That's not the point," she said dismissively. "The point is that family helps family. We've always been there for you." This sparked a flood of revisionist history, with everyone at the table suddenly remembering times they had supposedly helped me financially. My father claimed he had loaned me money during college. He hadn't. Heather insisted she had covered my rent once when I was between jobs. I had never been between jobs, and she had never paid my rent. Even James mentioned buying me groceries during tough times that never existed. Every time I tried to correct these false memories, I was talked over or accused of being ungrateful. It was as if they were constructing an alternate reality where I owed them this money because of past generosity that never happened. I worked 3 jobs through college, I reminded them. I paid for everything myself. We gave you a place to stay during breaks, my mother countered. Food, utilities, all of that costs money. I was your child, I said incredulously. That's what parents are supposed to do. And now you're supposed to take care of us, my father said. That's how family works. The conversation continued to spiral, with each family member becoming more demanding. Heather started planning vacations with her portion. My parents discussed which Florida communities had the best golf courses. Uncle Gerald asked if I could just write him a check tonight as a good faith gesture. I felt dizzy with betrayal and shock. These people, my blood relatives, were dividing up money that had been left to me by someone who had valued my hard work and character. They hadn't even asked about Maxwell, about our relationship, about why he might have chosen to include me in his will. They didn't care. All they saw were dollar signs. What if I say no? I finally asked, interrupting their planning. The table went silent again. My mother looked at me as if I'd suggested setting the house on fire. What do you mean, no? She asked. I mean no. I'm not giving any of you this money. It was left to me for a reason, and I intend to honor the wishes of the man who trusted me with it. My father's face darkened. Caitlin, be reasonable. This is your family. A family that just accused me of stealing and manipulation, I pointed out. A family that hasn't even asked how I feel about any of this. Heather's expression turned ugly. If you don't want to share willingly, maybe Maxwell's family would be interested to know how their father's employee ended up with their inheritance. I'm sure they have excellent lawyers. It was a threat, plain and simple. Are you blackmailing me now? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm reminding you of your moral obligations, she replied smoothly. To your family and to the truth. My parents nodded in agreement with Heather, a united front against me. James looked uncomfortable but said nothing to defend me. Aunt Barbara and Uncle Gerald watched with the avid interest of people enjoying a dramatic television show. I think, my father said gravely, you need to decide what's more important to you, Caitlin. Your newfound wealth or your family. Because you can't have both if you're going to be selfish about this. An ultimatum. Share the money or be cut off. As I looked around the table at these people I'd known all my life, I realized with startling clarity that they had shown me exactly who they were. And it was time I believed them. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Either I give you all millions of dollars that were legally left to me, or you'll cut me out of the family and potentially try to create legal problems for me. Don't be so dramatic, Caitlin, my mother said with a dismissive wave. We're just talking about what's fair. Fair. I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. Was it fair when Heather accused me of manipulating and stealing from a man who was like a father to me? A man none of you even bothered to ask about. We're just concerned about how this looks, my father insisted. A young woman suddenly getting millions from her elderly boss. People will talk. People like you mean? I shot back. People who immediately assume the worst about their own daughter? Heather stood up again, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm going to contact Maxwell's children tomorrow. They deserve to know what happened. Nothing happened. I shouted, finally losing my composure. Maxwell was a mentor who valued my contribution to his company. He was of sound mind when he made his will, with witnesses and proper legal documentation. You have no grounds for these disgusting accusations. I stood up to leave, but James moved to block the doorway. Come on, sis. Don't leave like this. We can work something out. Move, James, I said quietly. Not until you calm down and be reasonable, he replied, crossing his arms. Being physically prevented from leaving sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It felt threatening. I realized with startling clarity that I didn't feel safe in my parents' home, surrounded by my own family. I'm recording this entire conversation, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. Have been since I arrived. So everything that's been said tonight, every accusation, every demand, every threat, it's all documented. The color drained from Heather's face. My father's mouth opened and closed without sound. My mother placed a hand over her heart as if I'd physically struck her. You were recording us? She gasped. Your own family? That's an invasion of privacy. It's protection, I corrected her. And thank God I did it, or I might have started to believe I was the crazy one here. You can't use that, Heather sputtered. It's illegal to record people without their consent. Actually, Minnesota is a one-party consent state, I replied, silently thanking Maxwell for the random legal knowledge he'd shared over the years. As long as one party in the conversation consents to the recording, it's perfectly legal. And I consented. James stepped away from the doorway, suddenly less confident in his position as family enforcer. Caitlin, we were just talking. No one meant any harm, didn't they? I asked, looking around at their shocked faces. Heather accused me of elder abuse and theft. Dad threatened to cut me off from the family. Mom rewrote history to make me seem ungrateful. You physically blocked me from leaving. What part of that wasn't meant to harm me? No one had an answer to that. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Uncle Gerald cleared his throat. Now let's not be hasty, he said in his business negotiation voice. I'm sure we can all agree that things got a bit heated. Why don't we take a step back and discuss this calmly? There's nothing to discuss, I said firmly. The money is mine, legally and morally. I worked hard for Maxwell's company for 7 years, sacrificing weekends, holidays, and relationships. None of you showed any interest in my career until you found out it made me wealthy. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. We've always supported your career. Really? Because Heather has spent years making snide comments about how I was married to my job. Dad constantly asked when I was going to find a real career instead of playing secretary. None of you even came to the company holiday party when I invited you last year. The truth hung in the air between us. They couldn't deny it because they knew I had the receipts, literally, in the form of the recording. As I looked at their faces, I saw something shift. The naked greed and entitlement were still there, but now they were tempered with calculation. They were reassessing, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation now that their leverage was gone. Caitlin, sweetie, my mother tried again, her voice honey-sweet. We're just shocked, that's all. Of course we're happy for you. Maybe we got carried away thinking about what this could mean for all of us. Don't, I said, holding up my hand. Don't insult me by pretending this was all a misunderstanding. I saw who you really are tonight, and I can't unsee it. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Maxwell's words from years ago came back to me. Money doesn't change people, Caitlin. It just reveals who they've been all along. He had warned me that if I ever came into significant wealth, I would see people differently, and they would see me differently too. Sudden money is like a spotlight and a magnet combined, he'd said. It illuminates character and attracts both the best and worst in people. How right he had been. And how grateful I was for his wisdom now. I'm leaving, I announced, grabbing my purse. Please don't contact me for a while. I need time to process everything that happened here tonight. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice low and threatening, don't expect to be welcomed back until you've come to your senses. I turned to look at him, really look at him, perhaps for the first time. He wasn't the strong, principled man I'd built up in my childhood memories. He was just a person, flawed and fallible, whose love apparently came with conditions I hadn't previously understood. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. But I won't be extorted by my own family. With that, I walked out, ignoring the chorus of protests behind me. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with incoming messages. Heather was already doing damage control. You completely misunderstood everything. We were just shocked and said things we didn't mean. Don't make this recording public or you'll regret it. My father, your mother is in tears. I hope you're satisfied. James, come on sis. Don't be like this. Family is family. I turned off my phone and drove away from my childhood home, tears finally streaming down my face. The family I thought I had didn't exist. Perhaps it never had. I drove straight to Ethan's apartment, barely able to see through my tears. By the time I pulled into his parking spot, I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. I must have looked a mess when he opened the door, mascara streaked down my cheeks, eyes puffy and red, body shaking with each ragged breath. What happened? He asked, immediately pulling me into a tight hug. It took nearly an hour for me to calm down enough to tell him everything. We sat on his couch, my head on his shoulder, as I recounted the nightmare dinner in excruciating detail. To his credit, Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't try to offer solutions, just listened and held me tighter when my voice broke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Play me the recording." I hesitated. Are you sure? It's pretty ugly. I want to understand exactly what happened, he said firmly. And what we're dealing with. The "we" wasn't lost on me. In the midst of feeling utterly abandoned by my blood relatives, his automatic inclusion of himself in my problems felt like a lifeline. I played the recording, cringing as Heather's accusations filled Ethan's living room, followed by the escalating demands and threats from my family. Hearing it played back somehow made it even worse, the calculated nature of their manipulation more obvious from a distance. When it ended, Ethan's jaw was clenched tight. You need to call Sarah Bennett first thing tomorrow, he said, referring to Maxwell's attorney. Your family made specific threats about contacting Maxwell's children with false accusations. You need legal protection. I nodded, exhausted. I can't believe this is happening. I can, Ethan said softly. I've seen it before. Money changes how people see you. Suddenly you're not just Caitlin anymore. You're Caitlin with $12 million. The next morning, I called Sarah from Ethan's apartment. After explaining the situation, she immediately set up an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Bring the recording, she instructed. And don't respond to any more messages from your family until we've talked. Sarah's office was in a sleek downtown building with a view of the Mississippi River. Despite my emotional state, I couldn't help but admire the elegant simplicity of her workspace, all clean lines and muted colors. She listened to the recording without comment, her expression professionally neutral. When it finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon, she said. I've seen families tear themselves apart over much less money than you've inherited. What should I do? I asked. They're threatening to contact Maxwell's family with allegations that I somehow manipulated him. Maxwell anticipated something like this might happen, Sarah revealed, opening a drawer and pulling out a file. Not specifically with your family, but he was concerned that his decision might be questioned by various parties. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Maxwell's distinctive handwriting. He asked me to give you this if anyone ever challenged the legitimacy of your inheritance. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 6 months before his diagnosis. To whom it may concern. I, Maxwell Grant, being of sound mind and under no duress or undue influence, have chosen to include Caitlin Davis in my will for reasons that are entirely my own. Caitlin has shown exceptional dedication to my company, outstanding character in all her dealings, and has become like family to me over our years working together. My decision is not based on any manipulation or inappropriate relationship, as some might suggest. Rather, it is based on my desire to reward exceptional loyalty and to ensure that someone who shares my business values has a stake in the company's future. My children are well provided for, and they are aware of my decision. Any suggestion that Caitlin has acted improperly is not only false but defamatory. Sincerely, Maxwell Grant. Below his signature were the signatures of 2 witnesses and a notary stamp. I looked up at Sarah, speechless. He knew, I whispered. Maxwell was an exceptional judge of character, she confirmed. And he'd seen what sudden wealth can do to relationships. He wanted to make sure you were protected. So what do we do now? I asked. First, we send a cease and desist letter to your family members, warning them that any defamatory statements about you to Maxwell's family or others could result in legal action. The recording gives us solid ground to stand on. She continued outlining a protection strategy. Documenting all communication from my family, possibly filing for a restraining order if the harassment continued, and preparing a statement for Maxwell's children in case they were contacted. I've already spoken with Jessica, Maxwell's daughter, Sarah added. She wanted to meet you anyway, and I think it might be helpful for both of you to talk. After leaving Sarah's office, I felt marginally better. I had a plan, I had support, and most importantly, I had Maxwell's explicit confirmation that he knew exactly what he was doing when he included me in his will. Over the next week, the situation with my family escalated. Heather posted vague but pointed comments on social media about people taking advantage of the elderly and families being torn apart by greed. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother called daily, alternating between guilt trips about her suddenly deteriorating health and awkward attempts to act as if nothing had happened. I've always been on your side, she insisted in one message. It was your father and sister who got carried away. My father took a different approach, sending a formal-sounding email about how my financial obligation to family was a moral imperative regardless of legalities. He cited Bible verses about honoring one's parents and warned that my selfishness would have long-term consequences for my soul. James was the only one who seemed genuinely conflicted. I'm sorry about what happened, he texted. I got caught up in the moment. But family is family, right? We should be able to work this out. I didn't respond to any of them, following Sarah's advice to maintain distance until the legal protections were in place. 3 days after the dinner, I was leaving work when I spotted Heather's car parked across the street from my office building. I quickly ducked back inside and called security, who confirmed a woman matching her description had been asking about me at the front desk. That night, I installed security cameras at my condo. The next day, I changed my phone number, email address, and all social media settings. It felt extreme, but the sense of being hunted by my own family was deeply unsettling. On Thursday, I met with Jessica Grant at a quiet cafe downtown. I was nervous about meeting Maxwell's daughter, despite Sarah's assurances that she harbored no ill will toward me. Jessica was in her late 40s, with her father's kind eyes and salt and pepper haircut in a stylish bob. She greeted me with a warm hug that caught me off guard. I've been looking forward to meeting you, she said as we sat down. Dad talked about you all the time. Over coffee, she shared stories about Maxwell I'd never heard. His early struggles building the company, his devotion to her and her brother despite a demanding career, his quiet philanthropy that few people knew about. When he told us about his plans for his will, we weren't surprised, she said. He'd been telling us for years that you were the future of the company, that you understood his vision in a way few others did. Your family didn't mind? I asked hesitantly. Jessica smiled. Dad provided for us very well throughout his life. My brother and I both have successful careers and financial security. The company stake was more symbolic for us than necessary. She paused, stirring her coffee. But I understand your family is having a different reaction? I nodded, embarrassed. They've convinced themselves I manipulated your father somehow. My sister is particularly determined to prove I don't deserve what he left me. Dad warned us this might happen, Jessica said, surprising me again. Not specifically with your family, but he said sudden wealth often reveals unpleasant truths about relationships. He told me the same thing, I said softly. He also said you might need allies, she continued. That's partly why I wanted to meet. To let you know that if your sister or anyone else approaches us with accusations, we won't entertain them for a second." Tears welled in my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, Maxwell was still looking out for me. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means more than you know." Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Dad had excellent judgment about people. If he chose you for this, there's no doubt in my mind you deserve it." As I drove home from meeting Jessica, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. I had lost my blood family, at least for now, but I had gained unexpected allies and a deeper appreciation for the family we choose rather than the one we're born into. That night, I created a detailed document of all the harassment I'd experienced since the dinner. The texts, calls, social media posts, Heather showing up at my workplace, all of it carefully time-stamped and organized. I wasn't sure if I'd need it, but Maxwell had taught me to always document everything in business, and this felt like the most important negotiation of my life. As I worked, Ethan brought me tea and sat beside me, offering suggestions and support. In the week since the disastrous dinner, he had been my rock, never once suggesting I give in to my family's demands or questioning my decision to stand firm. "You know," he said as I finished the timeline, "your family thinks money changed you, but all it did was give you the freedom to set boundaries you should have been able to set all along." I looked at him, struck by the simple truth of his observation. "I never thought of it that way." "Maxwell didn't just give you financial independence," Ethan continued. "He gave you the chance to build a life based on your values, not your family's expectations." As I fell asleep that night, I realized that despite all the pain and betrayal, I was finally seeing clearly. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it was truly mine to choose. 2 weeks after the dinner from hell, I was in a meeting with my team at work when my assistant, Laura, slipped me a note. "Your family is in the lobby. Security is asking what to do." My heart dropped to my stomach. I excused myself and stepped out, hands shaking as I called the security desk. "There's a man, 2 women, and a younger man insisting they need to see you," the security officer explained. "They're claiming it's a family emergency." "There is no emergency," I said firmly. "I do not want to see them. Please escort them out of the building." "The older woman is saying she's having chest pains and needs her daughter," he added, uncertainty in his voice. My mother's favorite manipulation tactic, feigning health emergencies when she didn't get her way. I'd seen it countless times growing up, but this was a new low even for her. "If she's having chest pains, please call an ambulance," I replied. "But under no circumstances are they to be allowed upstairs." I watched through the office windows as security escorted my family out. My mother was walking perfectly fine, no sign of the distress she'd claimed moments earlier. My father was red-faced with anger, gesturing emphatically at the security guards. Heather was filming the whole thing on her phone, undoubtedly planning to use it as evidence of my cruelty on social media later. As they disappeared from view, I slumped against the wall, breathing hard. They had crossed a line by showing up at my workplace. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore, it was harassment. I called Sarah immediately and scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. By the time I arrived at her office, she had already drafted a restraining order application. "This is escalating in concerning ways," she said as I reviewed the document. "Showing up at your workplace, creating a scene, faking medical emergencies. These are not the actions of people who will be reasoned with." I signed the paperwork with a strange sense of detachment. Never in my wildest dreams had I imagined needing legal protection from my own family. "There's something else you should know," Sarah said once the documents were filed. "Jessica Grant called me this morning. Your sister contacted Maxwell's son, Michael, with some pretty serious allegations." My stomach clenched. "What kind of allegations?" "That you manipulated Maxwell when his mental state was compromised, that you isolated him from his family during his illness, and that you altered company documents to increase your position." Sarah's expression was grim. She's essentially accusing you of elder abuse and fraud. None of that is true, I whispered, though I knew Sarah was well aware of that. Of course not, she agreed. And fortunately, Michael didn't believe her either. He called Jessica immediately, who then called me. But Caitlin, your sister is actively trying to damage your reputation and potentially create legal problems for you. This goes beyond family drama. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. What do you suggest? I think it's time to take a more proactive approach, Sarah said. The restraining order will help legally, but it won't address the reputational damage they're attempting. We devised a strategy. First, I would send a carefully edited portion of the recording to all family members, including extended family who weren't at the dinner. It would include Heather's accusations, my parents' demands for money, and their threats if I didn't comply. Along with it would be a clear message. Any further harassment or defamatory statements would result in the full recording being shared more widely and potential legal action. The next day, I met with Jessica and Michael Grant for lunch. Despite the circumstances, it was surprisingly pleasant. Michael had his father's dry wit and strategic mind, while Jessica provided the emotional intelligence that balanced the conversation. We want you to know that we stand behind you completely, Michael said. Dad made his decisions carefully and with full mental capacity. We have documentation of his wishes going back years before his diagnosis. And we're prepared to make a joint statement to that effect if needed, Jessica added. We won't let your sister's false narrative stand unchallenged. Their support meant everything to me. In the midst of my own family's betrayal, Maxwell's children had become unexpected allies. That evening, I sent the edited recording to everyone in my family, along with the warning drafted by Sarah. The response was immediate and varied. From Heather, "How dare you threaten me? This recording was made illegally and proves nothing." From my father, "I'm deeply disappointed in your tactics. This is not how family matters should be handled." From my mother, "Please call me sweetheart. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Your father and sister got carried away, but I've always supported you." But there were other responses too. My cousin Rachel, "Oh my God, Caitlin, I had no idea this happened. Aunt Diane told everyone you were being selfish and unreasonable, but this is shocking." Uncle Gerald's brother Thomas, "I always thought Gerald was money hungry, but this is beyond the pale. You don't owe them a dime." Even my normally passive Aunt Martha wrote, "I'm sorry, dear. I've been on the receiving end of Heather's manipulations too many times to count." Stand your ground. The family narrative was splintering as people heard what had actually happened rather than the version my parents and Heather had been spreading. The next day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my brother James. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Just you and me. I need to talk to you." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a public cafe near my office. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the entrance, and waited nervously. When James walked in, I was struck by how tired he looked, the usual easygoing smile replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a worried frown. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "What do you want, James?" He sighed heavily. "First, to apologize. I was an ass at that dinner. I got caught up in the moment, in the idea of easy money, and I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I didn't respond, waiting for the but that usually followed such apologies in my family. To my surprise, it didn't come. Instead, James continued, "I've been thinking a lot about why I acted that way, why we all did. And I realized it's been our pattern for years. Heather leads, Mom and Dad follow, and I go along with it because it's easier than fighting." "That doesn't make it okay," I said quietly. "No, it doesn't," he agreed immediately. "Nothing about what happened that night was okay. The things Heather said, the way Mom and Dad acted, me blocking the door, all of it was wrong." He pushed a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm not part of what they're doing. I told Mom and Dad I won't participate in their campaign against you, and I told Heather to stop spreading lies. How did that go over? I asked, genuinely curious. He gave a humorless laugh. About as well as you'd expect. Dad's not speaking to me, Mom's alternating between guilt trips and crying fits, and Heather has blocked me on everything. For the first time since the dinner, I felt a glimmer of hope that not everything in my family was irreparably broken. I miss you, sis, James said softly. And I'm really sorry I put money ahead of our relationship. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. I appreciate you saying that, James. I can't promise things will go back to normal right away, but this is a start. 2 days later, I received an urgent call from Sarah. Your edited recording seems to have had quite an effect, she said. I just got a call from a lawyer representing your parents and sister. They want to meet. The meeting was set for the following Monday in Sarah's office. I arrived early, nerves making my stomach churn despite Sarah's assurances that I held all the cards. My parents and Heather arrived with their lawyer, a slick-looking man named Richard Anderson who specialized in family disputes. The tension in the room was palpable as we all sat around Sarah's conference table, carefully avoiding eye contact. My clients would like to resolve this unfortunate family matter without further escalation, Anderson began, his tone professionally conciliatory. They recognized that emotions ran high at the family dinner in question, and that things were said in the heat of the moment that were regrettable. Regrettable, I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Is that what we're calling false accusations of elder abuse and fraud now? Anderson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ms. Davis, my clients are prepared to offer a formal apology for any misunderstandings and to cease all communication regarding your inheritance if that's what you wish. Sarah leaned forward. And what about the defamatory statements made to Maxwell's grandson? The harassment at Ms. Davis's workplace? The threats to make her regret not sharing her inheritance. My mother looked genuinely shocked. We never threatened you, Caitlin. I have the recording, Mom, I said quietly. Every word. What my clients are offering, Anderson continued, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation, is a clean slate. They will retract any potentially harmful statements, cease all contact if Ms. Davis wishes, and consider the matter closed. I looked at my family, really looked at them. My father, rigid with suppressed anger. My mother, tearful but calculating. Heather, unable to meet my eyes, her usual confidence notably absent. Why the change of heart? I asked them directly. 2 weeks ago, you were dividing up my inheritance and threatening me if I didn't comply. Now you want a clean slate? What changed? No one answered for a long moment. Finally, my father spoke, his voice strained. The recording you sent to the extended family has caused complications. What your father means, Heather interjected, finding her voice, is that you've turned the family against us. Congratulations. I didn't turn anyone against you, I replied evenly. I simply let them hear what actually happened instead of the version you've been spreading. The meeting continued for another hour, with Anderson trying to negotiate terms that would essentially let my family save face, while I agreed to never speak of the incident again. Sarah skillfully countered each proposal, insisting on written apologies, formal retractions of all defamatory statements, and signed agreements not to contest my inheritance. By the end, we had a tentative agreement. My family would back off completely, issue apologies, and I would not pursue legal action or release the full recording more widely. As we prepared to leave, I asked for a moment alone with my family. Sarah looked concerned, but stepped out with Anderson after I assured her I would be fine. When the door closed, I finally said what I had been holding in for weeks. I want you to know that this agreement doesn't repair our relationship. You showed me exactly who you are and what you think of me. You were willing to destroy my reputation, threaten my financial security, and cut me out of the family over money that was never yours to begin with. Caitlin, my mother began, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. For years, I've worked hard, supported myself, and tried to make you proud. None of that mattered the moment you thought you could get something from me. That's not love, and that's not family. So that's it? My father asked. You get your money and we never see you again? That's entirely up to you, I replied. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be on new terms, with respect, boundaries, and the understanding that your behavior has consequences. I won't be manipulated, guilt-tripped, or threatened ever again. I stood up, gathering my things. I love you all, but I don't like you very much right now. And I certainly don't trust you. Earning that trust back will take time, if it's even possible. As I walked out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family without backing down, without compromising my own needs for their approval. Outside Sarah's office, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. Whatever happened next, I knew I would be okay. The money hadn't changed me, it had freed me to become who I was always meant to be. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation in Sarah's office. The world has continued turning, seasons have changed, and I've built a new normal that sometimes still feels surreal. The legal agreement with my family has held. They've maintained their distance, refraining from contact except for occasional texts from my mother asking about my well-being in carefully neutral language. I respond politely but briefly, maintaining the boundaries I've established. Heather, true to form, couldn't resist testing those boundaries once. 2 months after our agreement, she sent a lengthy email suggesting we put the past behind us and reunite as a family for our mother's birthday. The last line revealed her true motivation. Mom would love to see your new place. A thinly veiled attempt to get access to my new life. I declined politely but firmly. My relationship with James has slowly begun to heal. We meet for coffee every few weeks, carefully avoiding discussion of the rest of the family. He started his own small business without my financial help, and I'm genuinely proud of his independence. Some wounds take time to heal completely, but we're making progress. As for the inheritance that caused such upheaval, I've put it to use in ways that would make Maxwell proud. I established the Maxwell Grant Foundation for first-generation college students, providing scholarships and mentorship to young people who, like me, are working their way through school without family support. The foundation has already helped 30 students with full scholarships. I've also launched my own software company, focusing on cybersecurity solutions for small businesses, a gap in the market that Maxwell and I had often discussed. The 15% stake in his company gives me a solid foundation, but building something of my own has been incredibly fulfilling. The most unexpected development has been my friendship with Jessica and Michael Grant. What began as mutual support during a difficult time has evolved into genuine connection. We have dinner together monthly, sharing stories about Maxwell and supporting each other's ventures. Last month, they invited me to Jessica's daughter's wedding, introducing me to their extended family with warmth and inclusion that still takes me by surprise. One rainy afternoon in April, I met Maxwell's widow, Eleanor, for tea at her favorite cafe. Though I'd met her briefly at the funeral, this was our first real conversation. At 75, she had a quiet elegance and sharp intelligence that immediately put me at ease. Maxwell told me he was including you in his will, she revealed as we settled in with our tea. He was quite adamant about it, actually. I had no idea, I admitted. It came as a complete shock to me. Eleanor smiled. He knew it would. That was part of why he was so certain you deserved it. He said, the ones who expect nothing are usually the ones who deserve everything. She stirred her tea thoughtfully. You know, Maxwell had similar troubles with his own family when he first became successful. His brothers were convinced he owed them for some imagined support during his early career. His parents expected him to fund their retirement despite having abandoned him emotionally as a child. How did he handle it? I asked, hungry for guidance from the man who had mentored me in business, but hadn't lived to mentor me through this. He established boundaries and stuck to them, she said simply. It was painful, but necessary. In time, some relationships healed on healthier terms. Others didn't. He accepted both outcomes. Her words echoed what I'd been learning in therapy. For the past 6 months, I'd been working with Dr. Torres, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our sessions had helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships long before money entered the picture. Your family's reaction to your inheritance wasn't about the money, Dr. Torres had explained in one particularly insightful session. Money was just the catalyst that revealed existing dynamics. The entitlement, the manipulation, the conditional love, those were already there. Understanding this has been both painful and liberating. Painful to recognize that the unconditional family love I'd always craved might never have existed. Liberating to realize that their behavior wasn't my fault and wasn't something I could have prevented by being better somehow. Through therapy and reflection, I've come to see that Maxwell gave me something far more valuable than money. He showed me what genuine mentorship and support look like. Expecting excellence, but providing guidance to achieve it, celebrating successes without jealousy, offering criticism without cruelty. He modeled healthy boundaries and unconditional positive regard in a way my family never had. My relationship with Ethan has deepened through this ordeal. His unwavering support during my darkest moments revealed his character in ways that might have taken years to discover otherwise. Last month, we moved in together, a step I might have hesitated to take before all this happened. Life is too short to delay joy when you find someone who stands beside you through the storm. I've built a new community around me, friends who knew me before the money and treat me no differently now, colleagues who respect my work ethic rather than my bank account, and new connections made through philanthropy and entrepreneurship who share my values. Maxwell once told me, money is like water. It finds and fills the cracks in your life. Some of those cracks needed filling. Others were actually important boundaries that shouldn't be breached. I understand now what he meant. Money solved some problems in my life: financial security, the freedom to pursue meaningful work, the ability to help others. But it couldn't and shouldn't try to fill the cracks in relationships that were fundamentally flawed. The hardest lesson has been accepting that sometimes love isn't enough. You can love your family deeply while recognizing that they're not good for you. You can miss what you thought you had while acknowledging that the reality never matched the ideal. You can hope for reconciliation while protecting yourself from further harm. I still have moments of doubt and sadness. Days when I see a family laughing together in a restaurant and feel a pang of loss. Times when a childhood memory surfaces and I question whether I've been too harsh in my judgment. Holidays are particularly difficult, the empty spaces at my table a reminder of what's changed. But I also have moments of profound peace and clarity. The knowledge that I stood in my truth even when it cost me. The freedom of living without constant emotional manipulation. The joy of generosity on my own terms, helping people who appreciate rather than expect it. Would I give back the money to restore my family relationships to what they were before? No. Because what I lost wasn't a healthy family, it was the illusion of one. What I gained wasn't just financial freedom, but the courage to define my own worth outside of others' expectations. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined saying this, but in a strange way, I'm grateful for what happened that night at dinner. The accusations, the demands, the threats, they were painful, yes, but also revealing. Like a fever that indicates infection, they pointed to something unhealthy that needed addressing. If you're watching this and struggling with family dynamics around money, success, or boundaries, know that you're not alone. Standing in your truth may cost you relationships, but it will save your spirit. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. Those who don't, well, they're showing you something important about the nature of their love. I still believe in family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we create around us through choice and shared values. I'm building that family now, step by step, relationship by relationship. And to Maxwell, wherever you are, thank you. Not just for the inheritance, but for showing me what true mentorship and support look like. I promise to pay it forward. I'd love to hear your experiences with family and boundaries in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand your ground against loved ones? What helped you through it? Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the most important ones for your well-being.